Welcome back to Winning Isn't Easy. The hidden risk of musculoskeletal disorder or subjective medical condition limitations. Now, when you bought your disability policy or enrolled in your employer's plan, nobody told you that there would be certain limitations that could cap your benefits to just 2 years of benefits. And one of the two most common limitations are the musculoskeletal disorder limitation or the subjective medical condition limitation. And typical clauses can read something like this. If your disability is due to mental or nervous disorders, neuromuscular, musculoskeletal, or soft tissue disorders, or chronic fatigue syndrome, or fibromyalgia, or migraines, benefits are limited to 24 months. Now, this limitation doesn't apply if the claimant provides objective evidence of conditions such as radiculopathy. That's a lot of words here, and we need to review this language and start parsing it. And we have to start parsing it from the very beginning. We want to understand what's the definition of disability? What's the definition of mental nervous disorder? Is there a definition of neuromuscular, musculoskeletal, soft tissue disorders? Is there a definition of objective evidence? And it's the starting point for understanding what it is we have to prove. So let me tell you the case of Penland versus Metropolitan Life that will illustrate how this goes down. In Penland's plan, the definition of radiculopathy was diseases of the peripheral nerve roots supported by objective clinical findings of neuropathology. Again, a lot of words that we've got to parse. MetLife denied his claim, saying that the medical records did not show objective nerve involvement or functional limitation severe enough to prevent work. Okay, so what did the court find and why does it matter? Now, Penland argued that this limitation should apply only if the restricted condition was the sole cause of disability. That was a stretch, and the court agreed that it was a stretch. They disagreed, saying, look, your interpretation would make this limitation meaningless. He pointed to MRI results. He pointed to his physician notes referencing radiculopathy. But the court said, look, we've got subjective pain here, and this inconclusive imaging was insufficient proof. And ultimately, the court upheld this denial. So there's some lessons that can be learned. So let me give you some practical guidance moving forward. Number one, if you're a policyholder or plan participant, get that policy, read it cover to cover, and take apart the words. These words matter. So you want to understand what are the words, what is the definition, and what does this mean in terms of proof? So if, for example, the policy limitation has fibromyalgia and you have fibromyalgia, benefits are going to be limited to just 2 years. But let's say you have fibromyalgia and a herniated disc in your back. You are going to want to understand that after 24 months, your fibromyalgia claim falls away, and the carrier is only going to evaluate your back. But it requires objective evidence. So you may have had back surgery. The doctor, the neurosurgeon, says you're healed, but of course you've got chronic issues. The question is going to become, okay, what does the post-surgical MRI show? Is there still a herniation? Is there encroachment? Is there stenosis? Is there a progression based on subsequent MRIs? Is there an EMG and nerve conduction study test that shows ongoing radiculopathy? What does your physical exam findings show? In other words, what are the objective proof in your claim that would show that you are disabled as a result of, for example, the radiculopathy? But you need to understand that now, because after you have the surgery, you want to make sure, in this case, that your medical evidence is strong enough to show the radiculopathy and objective evidence. If you don't have radiculopathy, again, we might have the application of this musculoskeletal limitation or the subjective medical condition limitation. And let's talk about that. The subjective medical condition limitation is another form, if you will, of a limitation. And the policy may define certain medical conditions as subjective. So after you've had your surgery, but you still have pain, or you have muscle spasm, or you have weakness, or you have tenderness, or you have migraines, or you have body-wide aches. All these sort of subjective things, including pain, they're going to say benefits are limited to just 2 years. So you're going to need solid objective evidence such as MRIs, EMGs, nerve conduction study tests. I know that in some conditions, you're not necessarily going to have objective diagnostic studies like migraines. But you're going to have detailed provider statements explaining how the diagnosis was reached, the objective basis for the restrictions and limitations, the objective physical findings, and any diagnostic studies that support the conclusion that you have functional objective restrictions and limitations. You can guarantee to anticipate insurer challenges, and you need to be ready to have a strategy to make sure your records are complete and accurate, to understand what it is you need to prove, to have your physician on board to provide responses that are going to have to address the opinions of the insured hired consultants. I call them liar for hire peer review doctors. So knowing how to document and defend these limitations isn't just good preparation from the very beginning. It's going to really determine whether your long-term disability benefits continue or stop at the 2-year mark. Got it? Thank you for tuning into this week's episode of Winning Isn't Easy. I hope you found this episode helpful. And if you did, take a moment to like our page, leave a review, share it with your friends and family, and subscribe to this podcast. Please join us next week for another insightful episode of Winning Isn't Easy. Thanks for listening.